Hi, this is Akash Singh Rathod, and you're watching my YouTube channel, Views, Reviews, and Interviews, and I'm going to do a review of really fascinating work, Buddhist Revolution and Counter-Revolution in Ancient India. It's actually it's by Dr. Ambedkar, but it's edited and rearranged by DC Ahir. And for those of you who don't know Ahir, he was a bureaucrat of some kind in one of the state services, and he wrote a huge number of books on Buddhism and on Dr. Ambedkar, and I've learned a great deal from a lot of the things that he's written. This particular piece was originally published in 1996, and this specific edition by the Buddhist World Press is a reprint from 2017, and I actually got this on Amazon, I believe, or on some online book seller for 995 rupees, which is really quite a lot of money, and I'll come back to that. So what is this book? It's essentially, so the book here titled Buddhist Revolution and Counter-Revolution in Ancient India, but it's essentially an abridged, both abridged and supplemented version of Dr. Ambedkar's own unfinished and unpublished set of books that were called Revolution and Counter-Revolution in Ancient India. And you can get the entire whatever was written of these 7 projected books. I mean, it's really fascinating. Dr. Ambedkar, at the end of his life, after having achieved already so much, in 1956 projects that this text that he's working on is going to be 7 volumes, so 7 books like this, not just one book. Anyway, maybe a third of it, even less than that, was actually written by Dr. Ambedkar, and whatever is there, you can find in BAWS, Baba Saheb Ambedkar Writings and Speeches, published. There's one edition published by Maharashtra Education Department. There's another edition published by the Dr. Ambedkar Foundation, and you can get the entire text in volume 3 of BAWS. Now, this book does not include all of the text. It only includes about half of Revolution and Counter-Revolution, but it supplements with a few other texts that Ahir thinks really give context and make sense of what Dr. Ambedkar was trying to do in Revolution and Counter-Revolution. And the texts that that Ahir adds come from more or less three works. One is sections from the Buddha and his Dhamma, another incomplete but nearly complete book in 1956, published in 1957 of Dr. Ambedkar, and then 2 essays published in the Mahabodhi Society Journal in 1950 and 1952. One, Buddha and the Future of His Religion, and then the other, The Rise and Fall of the Hindu Woman. So what he does is he'll include material from Revolution and Counter-Revolution, that's volume 3 of BAWS, then he'll insert material from the Buddha and his Dhamma, and then insert some of the 1950 and 52 essays, and then more material from BAWS, and then again more material from the Mahabodhi Journal, to create what he believes to be complete picture of what Dr. Ambedkar was going for in these 7 volumes. And since Ahir has altered the text of Revolution and Counter-Revolution, he also alters the title, and he calls it Buddhist Revolution and Counter-Revolution in Ancient India. Now, I'm talking about how Ahir's book rearranges, abridges, and supplements Dr. Ambedkar's Revolution and Counter-Revolution, and that you can get the entirety in the BAWS Volume 3. But I'm not telling you what this book is about. And if you don't know Dr. Ambedkar's Revolution and Counter-Revolution, one thing you can do is have a look at, I think it is chapter 3. Let me just check. Yeah, chapter 3 in this book, Ambedkar's Preamble, which I've titled Equality, the Constitution as Revolution. And this is basically a kind of analysis and explanation of the argument of Dr. Ambedkar's Revolution and Counter-Revolution, which I contextualize within the whole orientation of Dr. Ambedkar's writings, especially from the penning of the preamble in the era of 48 to 50, and the drafting of Revolution, Counter-Revolution, and Buddhist Dhamma in the 1950s. So you can look at chapter 3 in Ambedkar's Preamble to get a good representation of this really magisterial work of Dr. Ambedkar's. I'm obsessed with this set of books of Dr. Ambedkar's, and I myself will eventually produce a work in a sense like this, but that I hope is going to be a lot more systematic and a lot more contextualized with notes and explain what Dr. Ambedkar is doing and why. In the shortest possible way, what Dr. Ambedkar is attempting in this set of works is to rewrite all of Indian history, and to do it with two things in mind. One of them is comes from this notion that is very popular even today, that words like equality that are used in the, for example, the preamble to the Indian Constitution, Articles 14, 15, 16, 17, and so on of the Constitution, that these are more or less imports from the so-called Western world. What Dr. Ambedkar aims to do is show that that is really absurd, and the absurdity lies in kind of two the absurdity is due to two causes. The first cause is that the way that equality is used, for example, in the 18th century rights discourse from America or France in these kinds of rights revolutions, the way that it's used there is merely abstract, and no concrete equality was actually achieved, especially for non-white, non-bourgeois, non-male persons. And so the abstract and inaccurate characterization of equality as coming from 18th century rights talk from the transatlantic world, Dr. Ambedkar wants to say, no, when we use the term equality, we need it in a robust sense, and it is a sense that derives not from abstract talk, but by actual practices in the post-colonial world, places like India, who struggled against empty notions of equality and freedom that were articulated from the transatlantic world, and made them through processes of resistance, civil disobedience, and struggle, and so on, who made them concrete realities. So if we understand that words have their proper denotation, not by their abstract sense, but their material, the real material conditions that give them meaning, then equality comes not from the so-called West, but from all of those places across the post-colonial world that struggled to realize these concepts. Secondly, then, how India in particular fits into this grand history, because according to Dr. Ambedkar, and this is the genius of this book, of this set of books, according to Dr. Ambedkar, the entirety of India's long history, millennia's long history, can be rewritten with the goal of India's, let's say, teleology, its telos, its aim or end, being the achievement of equality, of universal equality for all Indians. And the idea is that if you look at what Buddhism introduced into the ancient world in the more or less era of early Aryanism, you find that it is a revolution against the social values of hierarchy and patriarchy. And so Buddhism introduced an egalitarian and anti-patriarchal social revolution that has been understood to be a religious movement, but it's in fact much more a social and even a political and even a legal movement. But the emergence of Buddhism as a social movement was then crushed in a counter-revolution. So if the Buddhist revolution in early India was egalitarian, the counter-revolution, which is Brahmanism, was anti-egalitarian. And the mutation of early Indian society from Aryan, from the paradigm of Aryanism, post-Buddhism in the counter-revolution becomes Brahmanism. And this Brahmanism is even more hierarchical, more patriarchal. It creates new political structures, like the overthrow of the Mauryan Buddhist dynasty through Pushyamitra, and the reintroduction, for example, of violence, horse sacrifice, Brahmanism, and the legal reification or solidification of this political revolution through the Manusmriti, and then the ideological and philosophical and cultural reification of this Brahmanism through texts like the Brahmanas and certain Upanishads and so on, that begin to orient Indian philosophical thinking towards the direction outlined in Manusmriti. So what we get then is this counter-revolution against the egalitarian principles of Buddhism through a hierarchical, inegalitarian, patriarchal set of political, legal, and ideological, cultural counter-revolutionary acts that lasted, in fact, as far as Ambedkar's perspective in this series of texts, until the writing of the Constitution. And Constitution, that's why the chapter in this book is called Constitution as a Revolution. So it's a revolution against the counter-revolution of Brahmanism that was against the revolution that was Buddhism. So that's in some respects a sketch of Ambedkar's revolution, counter-revolution in ancient India. I've only touched, very vaguely upon the surface. It is a masterpiece. Definitely in the 20th century, one of the greatest pieces of historiography that I have ever come across, and I liken it to Hegel's philosophy of history from the century before, except that in Hegel, the teleological aim of history is towards freedom, and in Ambedkar, the teleological aim of all of Indian history is towards equality. It's absolutely mind-blowing piece of work, and everybody needs to read it. But do you need to read this version of it? Now here is the problem I had mentioned with the price tag, $9.95. Now I said you can get the whole volume instead of just the half that appears here in BAWS Volume 3, but as everybody knows, BAWS is almost impossible to get your hands upon. Now the Dr. Ambedkar Foundation is reprinting, but while you can get all of 21 volumes for probably 3,000 rupees instead of this for $9.95, it's impossible to find those. Now this does have essays from the Buddha Dhamma and those two essays from the Mahabodhi Society Journal, but those are also all available in BAWS. Now the thing that I would suggest to you then is that the Ministry of External Affairs has uploaded all of these volumes, and you can get them online. So probably instead of spending the $9.95 on this, I would just suggest going to the e-version, electronic version of BAWS, downloading Volume 3 and the Buddha's Dhamma and the two short pieces from the Mahabodhi journal, which in fact I think are in volume 3 anyway. So it would be much easier for you to get hold of Dr. Ambedkar's masterpiece in the BAWS version online for free than it would be to buy this book. As much as I admire and respect DC Ahir, and I like what he's trying to do, present a reconstruction of what Dr. Ambedkar is thinking. I myself attempt to do the same thing in this book, and I have plans to do it much wider, work just dedicated to revolution and counter-revolution. But getting this, I don't think is that good of an idea. I do love the cover though. So that is a review of Ahir's Revolution and Counter-Revolution, what it offers, nice comprehensive picture, its defects, the fact that it only includes about half of the original work, and it costs a bomb, and you can get all of these writings for free online. But despite Ahir's version of it, the real takeaway is that you have to read BAWS Ambedkar's Revolution and Counter-Revolution in Ancient India, one of the greatest pieces of history writing of the 20th century.